Yo, what's up, guys? My name is Hayes alongside Harrison Simeon, and we are back for episode 5 of the Skull Buff SportsCast. Let's get into it.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about that Colorado USC game today. Obviously, didn't come out on the right end of it, but it was really a growing experience, a learning experience for the team, obviously with that big second-half comeback against a team that, maybe looked sort of like in that Oregon game way ahead of our level in the first half, but in the second half, Amarion Cooper had that 196 yards in just about a quarter and a half of play. And overall, it was a really good learning experience, even though we didn't get back in it, didn't quite come back to tie. But, yeah, overall, it was, I think, a really nice game to see how that's to evaluate where our team's at this point.
Yeah, no, I thought so too. And I believe it's like this just strengthens the narrative that CU was trying to push last week. Because a lot of people wrote CU off and just called them trash and all these things and count them out, which is rather odd, especially because people weren't even predicting them to win 3 games this season. So it's like, okay, to even get to the point that they're at is one thing. But then for this performance, especially after going down, and honestly not even going down due to getting dominated in the way I felt like they were against Oregon. It seemed like there were a few mistakes here and there where it was just like, oh, that's a killer. Like Shador's second interception of the season, like that was just a bad throw. You don't really see him miss a throw that badly, and at least straight to a defensive back like that. It's usually out of bounds, a little bit short. He's not throwing an interception, so like that was one play that stood out. After that huge Amarion Cooper Sr. sack on Caleb Williams in the second quarter, Colorado had a chance to score on that drive, and I think it was going to tie the game or get within 7, I forget which, and on second down, committed a false start, pushes them back. They don't get the first down. It's 3 and out, and they have to punt, and then I think that was the block punt, and then now USC gets a score. So there's 2 instances there where USC gets great field position on just little mistimed things that ruined pretty much good play in what I thought.
Yeah, I mean, the first half would look like, if you just look at the result-wise, it's like, oh, here we go again. It's the Oregon game. Like everyone, people were saying, oh, if Oregon can beat them 42-6, imagine what USC can do with that offense. And Caleb Williams obviously having an amazing day. If you look at Caleb's results for the day, you would have thought it was a complete blowout. 6 touchdowns and over 400 yards. You would have thought, USC just walked us like Oregon did. But I think it was really in the first half, there were a lot of little missed opportunities here and there, stuff on special teams. Obviously, the worst throw I've seen from Shador all year on that pick. That really could have, that game could have been a little bit closer. Maybe USC was definitely outplaying us. Guys like Brendan Rice. It was Marshawn Lloyd, the running back, that was really killing us on the ground again.
Yeah, but honestly, he was killing CU on the ground in the first half. Yeah. I felt in that second half he wasn't having that production. I mean, USC wasn't having that production. I think it was they only scored twice in the second half.
Yeah, and it was really interesting because I kind of saw how our defense was able to stop the run a little bit better, and it kind of forced USC to go away from the pass, and it ultimately ended up with Caleb throwing his worst pass of the season that I've seen, and ended up for the 3rd pick of the year for Cameron Silman Craig, and that really started to get the crowd back into it, and it gave some life to the team, and it almost ended up with a CU comeback and a chance to win. So I think there were some promising things in the first half, even though the score was what it was. It was what was it, 34-14 or?
It was 34-14, I think it was. And then USC scored right out the gate to make it 41-14.
Right.
And then it went from there. And then from there, CU scored 20 unanswered points.
I don't know if it was unanswered, but...
Yeah, well, I think it was 20 unanswered points, and then USC scored to make it 48-34.
I don't know if we ever got within one score before that last touchdown with Jimmy. Because I know it's just crazy to me that it was 41-14, and then we just completely outscored them and outmatched them on offense the rest of the game. And made it 48-41 at the end.
Yeah, no, I got that out of order because it was touchdown to start the second half. For USC, Colorado scored, and then USC scored again, and then from that point on, afterwards, it was the 20 unanswered points.
Yeah.
Because Colorado scored 3 straight times to end the game. But yeah, no, but anyway, yeah, in the second half they just tightened up and played a lot better. And I think, like, one thing that stood out to me was that it seemed USC was getting tired, and that seems to be something that Colorado can capitalize on, especially at home, and especially when the crowd is getting as loud as they were this past weekend. Like, that was by far the loudest I'd ever heard Folsom in my life.
Yeah, I remember, I don't know what moment it was. Maybe it was the Marion Cooper sack, but the crowd just erupted at certain points. And I was right in the thick of it. Obviously didn't cover it media-wise, but I was with my family, and it was such a great experience. We were actually on the USC side of things, near some USC fans, and it was still loud right over there. Like, the Colorado fans were out and about, and I think it was the most attended game this season. I'm not sure actually. Maybe it was above Nebraska, but I know it was above like 54,000 fans. And I think in the first half we can go through some things. Obviously the defense struggled heavily again, but you can't really blame them. It's Caleb Williams. Though
What?
I think the strategy to stop Caleb was something that they needed to get away from because they weren't really sending any pressure.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, I can't even really blame the defense that much because, yeah, like you said, it's Caleb Williams. But on top of that, the block punt and the interception that I brought up earlier, that's a killer. When you are trying to stop Caleb Williams, of all people, and you have to try and stop him now from the 25 instead of you have to stop him from your own 25 instead of his 25, that's a whole different ballgame. Like, that's 50 yards. You don't have to know the game of football by any means to understand the difference. That's just simple math. And so I believe that, I don't know. I believe that the defense played well. I feel like it's hard to, there's certain points you can harp on here and there. And especially like I think it was the drive that made it 48-21. It was either the first or second touchdown that they scored. On that drive, Colorado forces a 3rd and 6, I think it was, forces Caleb Williams out to the right side of the field. He's on the run, tries to find, I think, Brendan Rice in like triple coverage. Ball gets tipped. Yeah. Cormani gets the interception, and there's a defensive pass interference.
Yeah.
And so it's like, as I mentioned before, it was just these silly like little mistakes, these silly little things that kind of just led to the ultimate downfall of Colorado. And I think it's just it just comes with being as new of a team as they are, and kind of just putting this all together. And that I think in a year from now, even if you have the same squad, if they just have that year of playing together, as well as whatever recruits Colorado's going to get, this is a different ballgame.
Yeah, and I think you forgot to even mention there was a 17-play drive early that ended in a missed field goal.
That is true.
By Feely. And so I think you did see, especially in the first half, that this team wasn't really put together yet. All the pieces weren't really communicating right, especially with so many injuries. Shiloh being out for the first time this year. Still no Travis, still no Slusher. Savion Washington went down. But I was going to mention how the offensive line really looked better for the most part. It ended in 3 sacks, but none of them were in the first half. And one of them was on a fourth down play, where there was a lot of time for Shedeur to throw and roll out to his right, where they were able to move the pocket. I liked how they were able to move the pocket, allow Shedeur to use his legs a little bit more. He had 50 yards on the ground, which is the most he's had all year, including that big touchdown. And I think the run game looked way better, especially with Hankerson, had some big runs. And the offensive line as a whole looked more put together and just overall a more cohesive unit like we saw in week 1 against TCU.
Yeah, I thought, what I thought the biggest thing is that, obviously the offensive line played a lot better than they did against Oregon. Anything.
It would have been hard to play worse.
Yeah. But I feel like as far as performances this season, this was one of their better performances, as you mentioned. But I think the biggest thing that kind of led to that was Shedeur's ability to escape the pocket. I'm assuming that this was something that was talked about, as Shedeur hasn't really run the ball until this game, up to this point in the season. And you saw it early in the game where he would step up and take off for a few yards. You saw it on the touchdown, and that really, I mean, that's huge. I mean, that might have been a sack a week ago. That might have been a sack 2 weeks ago. And so him being able to use his legs along with working with the offensive line, then like you mentioned, Hankerson getting his touches in. I mean, just adding that another layer to this already talented offense. I mean, that's so fun. And then speaking of layers, yeah, you throw Marion Miller, my bad.
There you go.
Don't want to mess that up. But Marion Miller into the mix and playing as well as he did in the limited time, as you mentioned. Like, I don't know.
He hadn't made a catch all year. I know he came in briefly, I think, in the Oregon game, but yeah, like, I mean, he hadn't had a catch all year, had 7 in the second half for 196 yards, including that first one, where I noticed him on the field, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's interesting. Let's see if he can make a play, because they took out Javon Antonio. He was struggling.
Yeah.
I don't know if he didn't have any catches, actually.
Yeah, for a while, like, I want to say, you only had 4 receivers with a catch in that first half.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. Like, there was not nearly as close to what you would see, and I mean, it makes sense with obviously Travis Hunter being out, and I don't know, Xavier Weaver, who never really got confirmation on how he was feeling, but
right, he was probably dealing with some injury. I saw that he was going into it with an ankle, and then he tweaked his knee. Okay. But he did end up playing through it, but he had 7 catches, but for only 29 yards. So he wasn't. Yeah. I didn't really see him able to have that same shiftiness he had in the open field, like he had in the first few games.
Yeah.
He wasn't really able to dig into the ground and like make good cuts. I think that was probably due to some of those injuries. But Jimmy Horn had a really great bounce back day. Was really nice over the middle, especially on his 2 touchdowns. And yeah, 7 catches, 84 yards. Underrated day. I'd say it's wild to say 7 catches, 84 yards, and 2 touchdowns is underrated just because of the wild performance by Omarion. But Omarion. So, why are we doing that? We were literally talking about it before the show, like the pronunciation and everything. But Omarion. Yeah, but I think Jimmy Horn's performance is going to be something to build on along with that run game. We saw Dylan Edwards had 12 carries for 44 yards, which is okay. I mean, he did honestly better in the first few games, but it was really Hankerson that came through that kind of became that bell cow that they've needed.
Yeah.
And maybe McCaskill's still not 100%, still only had 1 carry. Wilkerson only had 1 carry. And I think that they're starting to like Hankerson in that backfield to pair with Shador to get that run game going. And they really did. They got almost 200 rushing yards.
Yeah, no, I mean, the run game was huge, 200 yards, as you mentioned. I think, is that the most amount of rushing yards that Colorado's had in a game this season? I want to say it is.
Oh, yeah, easily. It's been the run game that's been just a struggle.
Yeah.
And I think to see them get to close to 200 is really impressive. Especially when you outgain USC on the ground by nearly 100 yards. They only had 95. We had 193.
Yeah. But I want to say like the 2 biggest things that really opened up their run game was obviously Hankerson was running the ball well. Edwards ran decently in his time carrying the ball. But you throw in Shador's usage of his legs, as we talked about earlier. That was huge. Just added that other layer. But it looked like Colorado went to the screen pass a lot more. I mean, I want to say that of Jimmy Horn's 7 catches, like 3-4 of them were screen passes, something like that. He was just able to run. He also had a carry in there. But I don't know. Outside of Horn and Shador, you have 4 different running backs carrying the football. I mean, there was a lot of different things that Colorado was doing that USC had to take care of and look for because Colorado was doing damage in all aspects of the field, in all aspects of the offensive game on the field. And so, I don't know. Yeah, that was just ginormous as far as getting the offense flowing and kind of getting back to what we saw in that TCU game, which was ultimately pretty much the most consistent all the way through, well-oiled machine that like we've seen the Colorado offense be.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think there's something to note is that there's that screen game because it's been interesting to see how CU has used them. Sean Lewis, obviously the play caller, early on, it was a lot of screens that I didn't really like. Didn't really do much. But as the game progressed, he kind of spaced them out in a more reasonable way where they were able to gain more yardage and catch the defense more off guard and make things less predictable. And I think that's what they need to do moving forward. Really incorporate that run game, really hammer it home. And that opens up the pass. I mean, that's very basic football stuff. So, yeah, and I think kind of going to the defensive side of things, another thing that made defending Caleb Williams so difficult, especially in that first half, was there were 10 different guys that made a catch for USC, and that was without their top receiver, Zachariah Branch. So Brendan Rice, obviously 2 touchdowns. That's big in his return to Boulder. But you saw what we did defensively later in that game, kind of in the second quarter. We put Cormani McClain in for the first time, giving him those starter reps, and he really held his own, I would say, especially against that prolific offense, as a prolific offense as USC is. Cormani really held his own, and I really enjoyed seeing him out there. Cooper did all right. The secondary was a bit sloppy in the first half. Roderick Ward, I saw out there a lot, led the team in tackles. But, yeah, in the second half, you really saw that defense be put together. You saw some consistency, and you would imagine Cormani's going to get those starter reps going forward.
Yeah, because the two things I want to note with mentioning Cormani McClain was that this is kind of a silver lining of that Oregon game, but with how much of a blowout that game was, Colorado played some guys that that might not have seen the field if not for an outcome like that, and Cormani seemed to be one of those dudes, like, after what Coach Prime had said about him in the press conference that week, and then seeing him on the field and kind of how he reacted after that as well. When asked about Cormani, it was like, I don't know, it was still like, oh, well, we'll see. But then again, USC comes out, plays well. Colorado looks towards that bench, looks at Marconi. I don't know why I'm stuck on that, but Cormani. And he comes in, and plays well. He only had 1 pass breakup, but I mean, that's good.
It was in the end zone, that pass breakup.
Yeah, that's true.
Saved the touchdown.
And then he had that 1 interception that was called back due to the PI, but I don't know. I thought he played a good game. And so, yeah, that was kind of the first thing I wanted to mention. And second of all, you already mentioned this already, but just seeing that defense kind of come together in that second half, I thought in the first half they didn't have as much pressure. Caleb Williams was able to roll around. One play specifically that stood out to me was a super long extended play. I want to say it was like the 3rd touchdown or something like that USC scored. Maybe it was 2nd touchdown.
He had 20 years to throw that ball.
Yeah, no, he had so long, and Amarion Cooper Sr. got lost a little bit watching Williams roll out. And I forget which USC receiver got loose for that touchdown exactly.
I think it was Washington. Washington. Taj Washington.
Yeah, it might have been.
He played really well.
But either way, that was just one play that kind of stood out as far as the pressure not getting there and then kind of getting lost a little bit.
It reminded me of kind of that play in Madden where you just sit in the pocket for so long and the play just breaks down.
Yeah.
And and then someone's just open. It was that he had that long to throw. And that was, again, kind of what I mentioned with how we defended Caleb Williams was not a great strategy at first, giving him that time, only sending 3. Now, it's almost impossible to do it because if you send a blitz, you're going to take guys out of coverage. You're going to allow for more open receivers to be there. But on that play, they only sent 3. And with our D-line as struggling as much as it is, it kind of sucked to see in that first half. But in the second half, you saw, Marion Cooper on that corner blitz, just boom, got him, made the crowd explode. A big sack that caused that field goal to go farther back and caused the field goal to miss towards the end and gave us even more life because it would have made things a 3-possession game. That was Amari McNeil, I believe, made that sack. So you saw those sacks in crucial spots when they needed it, and that was really a sign of how the defense is starting to come together. Especially that front 7, I think they played a way better second half, and they really grew as a unit.
Yeah, because on top of the little bit more pressure on the on Caleb Williams, you also just saw the run game just pretty much just stop in its tracks. You didn't see Marshawn Lloyd get loose as frequently, and that's a great thing because I'll tell you, that man, he runs the ball like an angry man. Like, there was one play specifically in the first half where he could have just ran out of bounds. There was like 4 Colorado defenders like around him, and he was like, you know what? I'm gonna just like turn my whole body and just run into whatever defensive back is like right in front of me.
I saw
and
that.
so
that
like
was so weird.
I'm not even sure if like he got any extra
impressive.
yards, but he was just like, you know what? I just want to truck this dude like just for the fun of it.
Yeah.
And so to maintain him in the second half as well as Colorado did, really slowed down that offense because it stopped the pass. It stopped the pass from being as effective.
Right, and it forced them to go to the pass, and that ultimately forced Caleb to it was a really bad throw. Like, the decision itself to go that deep when you're up by so much was really just dumb at that point. But we took advantage. It was a great pick by Silman Craig, and I really love how he's been playing in that slot. He's really been one of the more impressive parts of the CU defense. And I think, there's been all these bright spots. It's just been a matter of seeing them come together and play as a unit. And I think that second half, they really started to. And I think that's something they can build off of. Obviously, you don't have as big of an offensive test in the next few weeks, Arizona State and Stanford. But we can, if you wanted to sort of look ahead to those games, and I think they're going to be some of the most important games of the year, especially after 2 straight losses. Shedeur had never lost back-to-back games. This is a wild stat. He never lost back-to-back games since before high school.
I mean, I could believe it. But that's still crazy nonetheless. But yeah, no, I think these games will be huge. But given the way Colorado has performed, and I don't know, especially with ASU being 10th in the Pac-12, I think Colorado could definitely just come out and blow the brakes off of ASU and not really make it a performance and kind of have that little like statement performance to kind of show everybody that, yeah, we're still here. We just played some good teams and had some unfortunate endings, and that we're still a football team that you guys need to worry about and consider and be worried about for years to come. And this is only the beginning. And I think these upcoming games are the chance to do so.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine the game's close. I know you mentioned beating the brakes off of them, but that's what we said about CSU.
True.
Again, that's
True.
a rivalry game. It's a little different, but ASU, as poor as they've been, obviously with the bowl ban this year, maybe not playing with a ton of motivation. They're still tough. They gave USC a run for their money early, and USC kind of pulled ahead at the end. Now they did just lose to Cal, which I don't know what to say about what to make of that. I know it's a better Cal team than last year, but still, this is not a very good Arizona State team. But it's a conference matchup. It could definitely be tough, especially early. We've got off to some pretty slow starts.
Yeah,
that's obviously going to be one of Coach Prime's biggest points of emphasis. He mentioned in the press conference today is to win the first and second quarters. So I think if we can get off to that good start, I could definitely see us winning pretty handily. But if things are tight in the first half, I mean, it could end either way, in my opinion. I think Arizona State is still solid. They play with they play really hard, despite maybe they don't have enough talent on that roster. But I think our offense, as long as we can just get off to a good start, we could score 50. I think that could happen with ease.
Yeah, when I say beat the brakes, that's obviously like the best case scenario. I mean, anytime you blow out a team, that's best case scenario.
It's on the board for me.
But yeah, no, I think it's definitely well within the possibilities for this game. But I mean, yeah, you do have to think about it. I mean, like you said, Arizona State plays hard. Don't really know any college teams that don't. And it's going to be a home game for them. Obviously, it's how many losses? At 4 straight losses for this ASU squad. So I don't know. Personally, I feel like I want to give Colorado that blowout. Like, say that blowout possibility is rather huge. I don't think ASU is just gonna kind of randomly, not necessarily randomly with those games that you mentioned. As far as I don't know.
I think they'll play. They play people close. I just don't know if they are as good as winning those type of games as we are.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. Yeah. We'll see what happens, obviously, but I think Colorado is pretty set as far as the upcoming games. But I think it will be a point of emphasis to make these blowouts and really just show everyone that this because I think that the biggest the biggest thing of the season and the biggest thing of the USC game, as mentioned before, has really just been like the sloppiness. Because that CSU game shouldn't have been as close as it should have. That Nebraska game shouldn't have been as close as it was throughout that first half of the game. And just throughout the season so far, Colorado has just made certain mistakes at certain times and had just a little bit of sloppiness that you would expect, and that people called Colorado out for before the season started, being like, "Oh yeah, Dion, like you just got all these kids to come together and try and be a football team in less than a year, and with certain guys, less than a month, less than 3 months, less than half a year." Like, I don't know. I think it's really just kind of the length and time to kind of build that program. But I want Colorado to go for it and blow these teams out, these weaker opponents, to really show what they're made of, and I think it will really build their kind of identity for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be big games. We're going to have to probably win both if we want to be in a bowl game this year. Because you look at the games ahead. I mean, you have UCLA, you have Oregon State. Those are going to be really tough games. Oregon State's a really good team. UCLA is always going to be tough, especially on the road. And then there's Utah. And then there Arizona, I think, is another winnable one. But you're going to have to win these games, these next two, to really show that you can compete in that kind of maybe you're not in the top tier of the Pac-12 with the USCs and the Oregons and the Washingtons yet, but you're right in that mid-tier already. You're going from the very bottom to right into that mid-tier with like the Arizonas, you're definitely better than the Arizonas, the Stanfords, and the Arizona States, and you can compete with teams like UCLA, Oregon State, Washington State.
Yeah, because I really want. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, like the bias as like a Colorado student is kind of showing through here, but I mean, the feel around like the campus at Colorado is fantastic, and so to really establish themselves as kind of even towards that top of those middle tier teams would just mean so much, and it would be really incredible because the Pac-12 has been so good this year. I mean, like you said, I mean, Oregon, USC, Washington are the three that really stand out the most. But I mean, just six rankings behind Washington is Washington State, and then 5 rankings behind them is Utah. So you got multiple ranked teams that are in that middle tier of
the
conference. Like,
saying middle tier isn't some bad thing, because the middle tier are some of the top 25 teams in the country.
Yeah, and so for Colorado to win these next few games, that would just be ginormous for the season as far as making a bowl game, like you said, but just building that momentum going into these tougher opponents and really build it, like, I don't know, even though Pac-12 like won't be around, just building that persona as, we can knock off these teams that people don't expect us to beat. I mean, they've already kind of done that so far, beating TCU, but still kind of just need to establish that and really just, I don't know, back up kind of the talk and I don't know, rise to the standard that they've built.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a lot on not just the players, but the coaching as well. You saw a lot during the game that there were some questionable decisions, especially with the clock management at the end. They kind of burned some of the timeouts at interesting times. Maybe they were necessary, but again, like whenever you're down 2 touchdowns, you're trying to get 14, you're driving down, you're going to want 3 touchdowns just in case you don't have to rely so heavily on the onside kick.
Yeah.
And especially as long as the drive down it did end in a touchdown to Jimmy Horn, but it took a long time, and I kind of had some choice. I know I was very into the game, very passionate. I had some, I guess, choice words about Sean Lewis during that drive. In hindsight, it wasn't as terrible as it was, just because I think it was an overall discombobulation of the team, not to just pin it on the OC and the guy who's calling the plays. But again, I think running the ball there was a bit iffy. like not the best choice, especially when you were passing the ball so well. You had those weapons that were playing well, like Omarion Miller. You just kind of had to feed the hot hand at that point.
Yeah.
But I think overall, the coaching is going to just be a big aspect of this. The play calling, getting off to those quick starts, and kind of coaching up those guys to not take these teams lightly. Even though you've played a team like USC so close, you can't just take away a moral victory and then just go into it like you didn't lose the past 2 games.
Yeah, no, 100%. So I don't know. I mean, I don't really have too much more to add to that. I mean, you kind of just hit the nail right on the head. And I feel like with what I mentioned before, that kind of captures everything. I don't know. You brought up the timeouts. And that was just, I don't know. That was really weird with the review rules that kind of came into play because I want to say there were 2 instances where Colorado had called a timeout because of a reviewable play that then got reviewed like after the timeout.
Yeah, the refs were the refs were a little bit discombobulated. As discombobulated as like some of those teams were at different stretches.
Yeah, like as far as the calls went, like it was fine, like nothing to complain about really. Right. But it was just the game management. Like there was one play in the first half where Lincoln Riley pretty much just got a free timeout.
Right.
Like he wanted something reviewed. The refs were like, no, he was basically on the field. He was at the numbers.
I wasn't sure if it was a reviewer or like they were trying to get a substitution or like it was so weird.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what it was, but either way, they called a timeout. Both teams were on their sidelines and they're like, oh, psych, that wasn't a timeout. And then they came back and then just went and everyone was like, well, that was awful. And then especially with, then the timeout situations with Colorado later in the second half, that was interesting, and I think that just plays into the overall theme that I've repeatedly hammered home this podcast of just kind of just tightening everything up a little bit because as like I don't know, I feel like I've mentioned as far as the players, but just the coaching staff working together as well. I mean, when you have all these coaches that are trying to work together and still feel each other out as far as their coaching styles, personalities, building that chemistry, and kind of finding that specific game plan when you don't necessarily know exactly how these guys are going to play. Like I bet it must be so impossible to do that job when you've only seen a kid for 6 months and he could be playing the best football of his life or the worst football of his life or the most middle football of his life, and you just have no idea necessarily. You just kind of have to guess, and with all these moving parts and all these people with injuries and all these things, I mean, you have to deal with that with any football team, but in 1 year and the limited time that they've had, especially.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough job, and I mean, we covered a lot from this game, and there was so much that went into it. From the refs to the coaching decisions to the players on the field to breakout performances to the injuries and different things like that. It's just crazy to me that how well these quarterbacks played on that national stage. Shedeur with 371 yards, 4 touchdowns, and Caleb 10 touchdowns combined between both quarterbacks through the air, and then Shedeur ran for 1. And Caleb with 30 for 40, 400 yards, basically just had that one bad mistake. So, yeah, I think overall these are 2 lightning-fast offenses, and the defenses have kind of struggled to keep up, especially with that altitude affecting the fatigue in the second half. And, yeah, I think overall this game is just a really good learning experience. Looking forward to Arizona State, where I will be there, and I'll leave my score prediction at, I'm going to say, 45-31. See you.
I don't know. The ASU hasn't scored that highly yet.
I know.
I want to say Colorado 42, ASU 17.
Okay.
Like, I don't know. I
that was more than I predicted us to beat CSU by.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this it's kind of wacky. I've been accurate for the first few weeks, and then.
Did you do the pregame show for USC?
We did not. There's been, I don't know, some different things with the pregame show the past 2 weeks, but we're looking to get that back this week. But yeah, no, I mean, because even for this USC game, I didn't necessarily for the CU Oregon game, didn't expect Colorado to get blown out as bad as they did. Going to the USC game, I'm like, okay, Colorado got blown out, like I expect them to play better, but maybe it's still not as close. And then for it to only be a 7-point game by the final buzzer, it's like, okay, well, maybe didn't necessarily expect that. So his team is kind of all over the map a little bit, making these predictions harder. But yeah, I think that 42-17 mark is that's right in that range. I think the Colorado defense, if they can continue their well play, that's definitely within their capabilities. And I don't know, 42 as well within Colorado's capabilities.
Yeah, I think especially if those injuries, like if Slusher can come back this week, Coach Prime said there's a chance, and then Shiloh looks like it's more likely that he'll play, which will be big for the secondary. Roderick Ward started. I'd imagine he gets some snaps. But it's good to see that you could have those guys. Like one of my bigger complaints about the Oregon game was that Shiloh and Woods were playing every snap, and it was just really tiring for them because you didn't trust anyone else behind them. But you saw Roderick Ward played decent, and against the lesser passing attack than USC, where they're going to be, I would imagine there's more substitutions and more changing of personnel in the defense, especially in that secondary, just because you found those guys that can play can play deeper. Like you'd imagine Cormani will still play when Travis is back at corner, and guys like Roderick Ward and who else started? That was kind of a backup. I'm trying to remember.
I mean, honestly, there was just so much. The linebackers kind of shifted around a little bit here and there.
Jacquez Robinson. That's who I'm thinking of. He played pretty well too. I think I would imagine he sees some time just in the Arizona State and Stanford games as well. So we'll see. These games are going to be critical.
Yeah, no, for sure. I feel like we've hammered that point home. Not sure about what else we could add on to that. So I guess let's look forward to some of the other in-season D1 sports with volleyball and soccer. Volleyball, not really. Oh, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. We were going into different sports at the same time, but you can start with volleyball.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just figuring we could get volleyball out of the way.
Damn.
Yeah. two losses. 0-3 loss to UCLA, and then 1-3 loss to USC. So
yeah, hoping they can bounce back in the Pac-12 schedule, because it was a little bit rough. But soccer, though, they just keep rolling. They went to Oregon on the road, won both games. Really, really happy with them. Shira James has just been on fire this year. She's leading the team in goals, and I think the team as a whole really has a good identity. They haven't given up too many goals in any game they've played this year. They've played defensive, and then they just find their goals through different things like set pieces, and they just find a way. Yeah, and I'm really impressed with how they've been playing this year.
Yeah, I mean, they've only given up more than one goal once this season, and that was to UCLA, the number 5 team in the nation. So, I mean, you can't even really be mad at that. That's kind of expected when you're playing such a highly ranked team. And so, for the Colorado Buffaloes to be playing as well as they are on the soccer pitch is fantastic. They have Stanford and California this week, both at home. Those are on Thursday and Sunday. Stanford at 7 o'clock on Thursday, California at 2 o'clock on the Sunday. So if you're in Boulder, you can catch those.
Yeah, Prentup, it's been getting crazy. Even that big game against UCLA was one of the biggest crowds in Prentup history. It was packed, and hopefully they can keep taking care of business, because this is a really exciting team, a team that has a lot of determination. They kind of exemplify or kind of represents Boulder itself, and I think they can't be overshadowed by that football team as well as all the other excitement in the other sports like football and basketball. Don't forget about the soccer team. They've been really killing it. They're 10-2 on the year. So
yeah, no, they've been killing it. And yeah, the volleyball team has been playing well. Despite the past 2 losses. They have 2 home games coming up on Friday and Sunday. They played number 5 Oregon on Friday, so that'll be interesting coming off the loss that they have, because now on a 3-game losing streak, and then Oregon State on Sunday at
Okay.
home at noon. So yeah, so a lot of Colorado sports coming up. Definitely catch those because yeah, and like volleyball isn't doing necessarily as good as soccer, but still winning record at 9-6, playing decently, looking to find themselves in the Pac-12. And yeah, soccer team, like you said, just playing fantastic. You would know a little bit better than I do, but what's the state of club sports around at CU?
Nothing really in the past week. I know there is club baseball coming up. Baseball will play CSU in a doubleheader. They're obviously coming off those big wins against Wyoming 2 weekends ago, and we did a little media day after that, and so we already had some content come out from that. We'll have some very soon. Hockey, I know they played Oregon twice and they split it. They won the second game, lost the first. So they had their first loss of the year, but they're still looking pretty impressive. They won that second game pretty impressively. So maybe that first loss was a little bit more of a fluke. And they ended up scoring, I think it was 5 or 6 goals in that second game against Oregon. So club hockey doing very well. That's a D1 men's. And then D2, I forget if I think they have played recently. I couldn't tell you what the results was because they've all been on the road. All the sports have been on the road. But this weekend, coming back home, football team will be on the road though. But I'll be there. I'll be in Tempe. That's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
I got to look more into Arizona State's roster itself because I don't really know how they run their offense. I did watch some of their game against USC, and they look pretty good. I mean, they have some talent on the outside at receiver, so it's gonna be interesting to see how those corners can continue the momentum of playing like Cormani, like Omarion Cooper, and we'll see if Omarion Miller can continue his momentum of his breakout performance and not just kind of have that one shining game and then go back to being kind of the pedestrian receiver. But I think, especially with Weaver dealing with injuries, we should see some snaps from him, even when Travis comes back. So, I mean, that freshman class is crazy.
Yeah.
We have a lot of experience in seniors like Shiloh and others, but the freshmen like Dylan Edwards and Omarion Miller are going to be a huge part of the next few years for CU.
Yeah, for sure. And even those lesser guys who haven't necessarily been putting up historical record-breaking performances are still playing well. But yeah, no, I think that's all for this week. So got volleyball and soccer both at home this week. Got multiple games, and then football playing ACU at 4:30 this Saturday. Got Skull Buff Sports coverage. Harrison will be there, so make sure you guys catch that. We haven't really asked for this in past podcasts, but if there's anything that you guys want us to talk about, any questions, any needs,
special guests.
Yeah, any special guests, we'd love that too.
We have a little pull. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, we're trying. We have a few different personalities we're trying to talk to and get on the show. And we'd love to get you guys involved with the show because yeah, you're what we do it for. And yeah, so I think that's it for episode 5. So my name is Oliver Hayes.
I'm Harrison Simeon, and let's go Buffs.
Yeah,
You heard it here first.
Peace.